Welcome back. Now, let's take a look at some international stories now. The race to replace former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is heating up. Former Treasury head Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss are vying for the top seat. The two politicians will participate in a 6-week campaign tour, and the final results are expected to be announced in September. Meanwhile, the UK and other European countries are experiencing a period of unusually hot weather. The heat wave has resulted in massive fires. Let's go to our UK correspondent, Julia Chapman, now to just give us more details. Julia, let's start with, these wildfires, especially in Greece. Is it the only country that is experiencing such bad fires in Europe so far?
No, certainly not. We've seen a number of European countries experiencing similar fires across the continent over the past week. Greece has become the latest to be hit with them. The island of Lesbos over the weekend had a series of fires that resulted in the evacuation of a big holiday resort in the mountains near Athens. There were fires as well that destroyed some homes, and locals had to be evacuated there. In the western Peloponnese in southern Greece, there were fires approaching the archaeological site of ancient Olympia, although we understand now that the winds have shifted and that site does not appear to be in any risk. But undoubtedly, Greece is now at the front line of what we have been experiencing across the continent over the past week. Last week, we saw record temperatures here in the UK, in a number of northern European cities as well. Very high temperatures indeed. Here in Britain, for the very first time since records began, temperatures exceeded 40 degrees in some parts of the country. So this is now a broad phenomenon across the continent. Temperatures have cooled off somewhat in the south of the continent, but here in London as well, we're seeing lower temperatures. But undoubtedly, the fires have been an incredibly worrying feature of this shifting climate. We've seen them in France, we've seen them in Spain, in Portugal, in those two countries as well. The World Health Organization says there have been 1,700 heat-related deaths since the summer began. So very worrying factors happening here as temperatures are much hotter than we have been seeing in previous years across the continent.
So firefighters have their hands full at the moment, and I'm hearing that particularly in Greece, as you said, being the latest country to experience the wildfires, they've had to evacuate even tourists at beach resorts such as Vatera, etc. Do you know exactly how bad it is in terms of the number of homes that have been lost, etc.?
The number of homes destroyed in Vatera isn't yet clear. We understand, though, that the fires there are now under control, but certainly across Greece there have been a number of areas where firefighters have been sent in to tackle the blazes. And of course this comes after Greece experienced its hottest ever summer last year, really catastrophic wildfires destroying vast swathes of the country as well. I think it was 300,000 acres across Greece destroyed last year. It is possible that this year could be even worse. We are seeing firefighters in villages around Athens as well having to tackle blazes. So really a very worrying situation for Greece and the continent more widely.
Let's talk about the British Prime Minister part of what's happening in the UK. I mean, in about 2 months' time, or actually in a month's time, we're expecting the new PM to be announced there. And of course, the race has come down to 2 people. And as you heard me say in our introduction to me speaking to you, they will be campaigning. But of course, the Conservatives still hold the power. So it's not like they're campaigning to the public. Am I correct? That's the law around it. They're campaigning to the party for them to be selected.
That's right. So now there are 2 candidates in the running remaining for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Ultimately, they will become Prime Minister, whoever wins that race. They have already made it through the first phase of this vote, which is the party membership in Parliament. So members of Parliament chose their favoured 2 candidates. Now the vote goes to the membership of the Conservative Party. Now, that doesn't mean every single Conservative voter in the country, only those that have a paying membership and have held that for more than 3 years. It is understood that that number is around 160,000 people, so less than 0.25% of the UK population will be deciding who becomes the next Prime Minister of the country. And the reason for that is because of the electoral system here in the UK. The voting, when we have a general election, is for a party rather than one particular person. So although Boris Johnson was elected as Prime Minister, whoever succeeds him as the leader of the Conservative Party will run the country. We understand that the date set for that is September 5th. We'll know who the winning candidate is in this leadership race. But yes, the two candidates now left remaining are Rishi Sunak, who was the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister of the United Kingdom under Boris Johnson until he resigned. His resignation was one of those that brought about the end of the leadership of Boris Johnson himself. And Liz Truss, who is still the Foreign Secretary under Boris Johnson at the moment. So both prominent members of his cabinet, but they are campaigning on very different platforms as they try to appeal to voters. They are going to be going head-to-head in their first two-person debate on British television this evening.
And just lastly, tell us a bit more. I mean, this is not the first time this happens, right, in terms of a British Prime Minister deciding to step aside, etc. It happened even with Theresa May, for instance. So, but tell us about Rishi Sunak. I believe that if he does win this campaign, he becomes Britain's first British Asian person to actually take up this position.
That's right, he would be, although at the moment polls are not looking particularly favourable for him. They are putting Liz Truss quite significantly ahead. Now, if she wins, she would become the third female Prime Minister to run the UK. So certainly a growing number of female leaders potentially in this country. But yes, Rishi Sunak would be the first Asian Prime Minister of the UK. He is campaigning on a platform of trying to get the economy back under control after COVID, after very, very difficult economic times, and at a time when the country is facing a very big cost of living crisis. We're seeing inflation soaring here in Britain, like in much of Europe. Liz Truss, on the other hand, campaigning on a platform to reduce taxes immediately, something that Rishi Sunak says he would do eventually when it allows, when the economic situation is more favourable, but not something he is promising to do at the outset. Tax has become really the major campaign issue of this election. But of course, today at the debate, we're also expecting the two candidates to talk about immigration, to talk about China and its role on the world stage, as well as the war in Ukraine and what support would be given to Kyiv under these two potential future prime ministers. So really a range of issues are being put forward, but certainly tax will be the defining one.
I think, if somebody had to promise any of us in South Africa the same thing, we'd definitely vote for them. Thank you very much, Julia, for speaking to us. That was our UK correspondent, Julia Chapman, there speaking to us about what's happening in Europe. Staying with stories around the United Kingdom, the High